So we're about halfway through the F1 livery launches this year, and so far it has been underwhelming. The carbon fibre. There's so much of it. Look, I know they've got to save weight and keep things as light as possible, but the colour scheme, the livery, that's where it's at. And we, the fans, care a lot about the colour scheme and the livery of the cars. But look, I get that every single aspect of the car has to be functional and contribute in some way to the overall performance and speed of the car. But to us mere mortals who could never get near to an F1 car on an engineering level, the livery is what stirs the interest and makes the cars memorable. Sometimes immortal. A vibrant livery can turn an absolutely rubbish car into a cult icon. You can definitely forgive a poor car if it looks good, but also vice versa. A massive aspect of the great cars is how they looked and how that made you feel, not necessarily the top speed or their time to 0 to 60 and things like that. But from what we've seen so far, livery-wise, this is going to be a tough year, I think. But the blame has to be pointed fairly and squarely at the rules and those who are making them. Teams are trying their hardest to save on weight, and pretty much the only thing on the car left to sacrifice is the amount of paint they use. But then again, if the engineers and clever people completely had it their own way, they would probably run with absolutely no paint on the car at all. But then you need sponsors so you can make money and pay for salaries and catering bills and things like that. So apparently a fully painted F1 car will have around 6 kilograms worth of paint on it, which in day-to-day terms is quite heavy and would make a significant difference, but in F1 terms, that is a ton, pretty much. However, it's the way that the rules are set up which allow this. Modern F1 cars are big, fat, heavy machines, not like the lean, nimble, agile things that we saw in the V8 and V10 eras. So yeah, while it is depressing to see these bare carbon fibre liveries, you do have to sympathise with the team somewhat. I'd like to think that a new rule will be introduced to allow some sort of allowance for paint and to have cars fully painted again in 2025 and onwards. Because firstly, as fans, colour schemes, liveries, paint schemes are something that we all absolutely love. And secondly, if you're a potential sponsor, say DHL for example, a possible deal breaker for a title sponsorship deal could be that you paint the entirety of the car yellow. But because of the rules and regulations of this isn't allowed. But we have to put on our big boy pants here and accept the reality of the situation. And it is that these carbon fibre based liveries are likely to be a ugly trend of this year and probably next year as well. But we've put up with some ugly trends before. Remember those weird donkey dick noses of the early 2010s and also those weird step nose things as well. They were quite horrible, but we got over it, didn't we? Hopefully sense will prevail, but for now we're just going to have to deal with it. But this still doesn't mean that teams can absolutely take the piss and crap out these unimaginative, vacuous and forgettable liveries that we've seen so far, except for a couple, which I'll get into in a second. Now, fair play to McLaren, they've kind of tried to make it work. They've added the orange to make it kind of hark back to the Marlboro McLaren days, kind of a reverse negative version, I guess. Basically trying to make the best of a bad situation, and I think kind of, yeah, fair play McLaren, you've done all right there. But still, it's carbon fibre, isn't it? Now, the HAAS sort of works, I guess, because of the MoneyGram sponsor, and it's more or less the same as last year, and they're kind of continuing the trend they've done the last couple of years, so it's not a huge shock what HAAS have done so far. No real surprises there for HAAS. Sauber, or Steak as they're known now, bland carbon fibre livery, but was saved, I think, by the neon green splashes of colour. Bit too many right angles for my liking. Looked like it was just some vinyl graphics slapped on the car. Would have been nice to see some more kind of swooshes and maybe some spiky areas or something. But yeah, it's actually a colour which is rarely seen in F1, and you kind of see it more on these kind of fictional designs that you see knocking around on Instagram and Twitter. It is the green, I think, to be honest, that saves this car. If that green had been like a blue or a red or a white or something, combined with that carbon fibre base, it would have just been awful. And then we have Alpine. Their new livery, both of them, because they're sticking with the whole thing of having a mostly pink livery in the early races to appease the BWT title sponsorship. Their liveries are god awful. How can you work so hard on something which is just so bad? The most impressive part of the Alpine launch, I thought, was actually the lady presenting it, hosting it, and she was just working her hardest to try and sell it positively and trying to get a positive reaction out of the launch. I don't know her name, but whoever you are, fair play to you. Alpine have really done the bare minimum here, and when you consider how their cars have looked in previous years, especially when they were under the guise of Renault, when they had the black livery with the yellow stripes on it there as well, that looked really good. That looked really classy and stylish, and they really did a good job here. But how they've done the pink and the blue and everything to go with the BWT sponsorship, it just looks rushed, and yeah, it looks like that they don't care. Now, in most of the launches we've seen so far, they've been quite tactical with the use of things like lighting and presentation and lasers. Obviously, they've polished and cleaned up the cars very much beforehand, and I think they've done some Photoshop work on all the the official images that go on social media, all basically to steer attention away from the obvious lack of color, and also to kind of make the carbon fiber seem as dark and as black as it can possibly be. So presentation wise, when you see the cars in the studio and with the correct lighting and correct everything, they look acceptable presentation wise. But in the real world, the cold light of day, particularly on the racetrack, I think these cars are going to look awful. Because when you see actual carbon fiber in the flesh, it's not that black at all as we've seen on the social media photos. It's kind of a blackish, greyish, silveryish kind of colour, especially when sunlight reflects off it. So the night races may look okay with all the lighting, but the day races, they're definitely not going to get the intended results that they're after. When Williams revealed their livery, I kind of thought they did a pretty good job overall. I mean, creative-wise, it's almost identical to last year, but they've actually painted the car and kept the exposed carbon fibre parts of the car in areas that you wouldn't really pay much attention to or aren't really that visible. However, I wouldn't be surprised if as the season goes on we start to see some colourful parts of the car being stripped away to save weight and help develop the car as the season unfolds. I think Mclaren did this a little bit last year as well. But then, one day, Visa Cash App RB, the team with the worst name in F1 history, the most commercialised nonsense name of all time, dropped what could be the best livery of the season. And I'll be honest, it is pretty. It's painted blues and reds and whites. I think it looks fantastic. Also with absolutely minimal carbon fiber actually showing. But what this shows again is no matter how rubbish the team name is, or potentially how rubbish the car might be, there is room to forgive them if the livery is decent. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of open to letting the team name slide after seeing the livery. I think the name is here now whether we like it or not, and I think we're just going to have to put up with it now. I guess we'll have to wait and see what it looks like out on the track, but I think overall they have smashed the livery for this year. It's got a bit of old, a bit of new. It's an actually painted car this year, which, from what we've seen so far, could be a rarity. So at this point in the livery launch stage, we're about kind of halfway, and we've still got Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull to go. And apart from Mercedes, I'm actually kind of feeling a little bit optimistic about the other three. I'm kind of bracing myself for the Mercedes launch because they could go a few ways. They could go that all black, all silver, or a combo of both. What I would put my money on is that they're likely to continue the whole black car livery that we saw last year. The livery is going to be black, which is basically, from what we've seen, bare carbon fiber with splashes of cyan for the Petronas sponsorship and dark red for the Ineos sponsorship. And given their performance last season and what we can expect from the W15 this year, which may or may not have sent Hamilton running over to Maranello, they are going to do anything they can to claw back any shred of performance from that car, and in this case I think paint is the first thing that's gonna go. Now I'm really counting on Aston Martin, Red Bull and Ferrari to kind of give us something good. Perhaps Aston Martin less so, because I think Ferrari and Red Bull are kind of relying on tradition here a little bit. Red Bull I think are going to do the same thing they sort of always do, have pretty much the same, and Ferrari, I think if they do anything except have an all-red car, there's just going to be uproar. And also I kind of think Ferrari and Red Bull are going to have enough performance in hand to not go the whole drastic route and just have an entirely black car, basically. I mean, Aston, Ferrari and Red Bull were very tactical when it came to using the exposed carbon fiber last year, because they used it in areas that weren't totally obvious and areas that we don't really pay much attention to. And in Ferrari's case, they actually kind of used it in quite a tasteful way, I thought. What Ferrari did reminded me of the 643 from 1991, where they had the exposed carbon fiber running down the sides of the nose. So in my book, that kind of worked. Unlike what Alpine or Sauber have done this year. Red Bull are kind of blessed here a little bit because the navy blue was so dark that unless you looked really closely or saw the car in the flesh, the carbon fibre base bits weren't really noticeable. To be honest, that RB19 was such a rocket ship that you could have painted it with industrial grade Soviet lead paint and it probably would have made no difference at all. So I guess what I'm saying is that we can bitch and moan and complain about these liveries, and as fans we kind of have every right to. We help pump money into the sport at the end of the day. But the teams, I guess, really don't have a choice right now, and they probably are loaded with graphic designers and all these artistic people who are probably pulling their hair up because they can't do what they want to do. Let's just hope that sometime soon there is some weight allocation made for paint and we can see some liveries again which help capture the imagination of the fans and also grab your attention a bit, and at the start of the season make you go, that's the team I want to support. The livery of a car is such a huge part of a team's identity. You know, such pride was, perhaps at one stage, taken in it. Now we've seen cars painted black loads of times over the years in Formula 1, but at least they were painted actual gloss or matte black, not just this exposed carbon fibre colour. Guaranteed, if those Lotus John Player Special cars were gold on carbon fibre, they wouldn't have looked half as good. And one final thing, and I'd really love to know what you guys think about this in the comments, but I think you can judge the team's mentality of the year ahead by how much exposed carbon fibre is on the car. The less paint there is on the car, the more worried they are about the year ahead. The more paint there is on the car, the more confident they are about going into this season. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching again. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and plenty more videos on the way soon. See you again. Thanks.